Yeah. Now, super. So, like I said before, guys, welcome everybody. My name is Abby McRae. I am the Family Help Manager for the Youth Safe team. So Youth Safe stands for Youth Substance Awareness for Everybody. So we support teenage age young people around substance and alcohol use. We have been able to successfully get some funding from the Community Alcohol Partnership to build some resources for the service. And part of those resources were lived experience videos that we created with the Well community. So we had some residents there at the Well community to create these videos with us for us to be able to use them as learning tools in sessions with young people that we support. From the back of that, we linked in with the Daniel Spargo Mabs Foundation. So we've got lovely Asha, who's going to be presenting for us today. And using the lived experience videos, we created some, I suppose, sessions that you guys as professionals working with teenagers would be able to use with any young people that you work with around alcohol awareness, harm minimisation, risk and safety, so that you guys feel more equipped when working with young people and have more general knowledge around that. So obviously it's really important for us as a service to support and get that prevention in there for young people through kind of Cumberland. So we wanted to kind of open this up to as many different professionals as possible from as many different avenues as possible and kind of bring us all together. And, you know, obviously communication and partnership is key when we're supporting young people. So we hope that you enjoy this. And Asha, I'll let you take over.
Thank you very much. So hopefully you can all see my screen share. So my name's Asha. I am Head of Education at the DSM Foundation, which is a drug education charity. Some of you may well have come across us before because we did some work in quite a few schools in your area, some workshops through some funded evaluation that we had through the NIHR last year, and before that the play that tells Dan's story, for whom the foundation is named, toured around quite a few schools. So we've had kind of input into quite a few schools up there, and we also have done some training for foster carers as well. So even though we're based in London, we are a small charity with a big heart for trying to do what we can to enable young people to make safer choices about drugs. And we came about because of a young man who did not have any drugs education called Dan. And because of that, he had a night that just went terribly, terribly wrong. And when he was just 16, he took an accidental overdose of ecstasy and he lost his life 3 days later. His parents had identified that drug education was something that had been missing for him and was something that they could do something about. And so they set up this charity, and it is all about universal drugs education. Everybody at some point is going to be in a situation where they have to make a decision about drugs or alcohol, even if they're not planning to engage themselves. Being able to kind of navigate those situations, understand what's going on, recognise when things maybe are not going as they should be, and what they can do in that situation, that really impacts everybody. So that's what we do. And as I say, we have done quite a lot of work in your area before, and we were delighted to be approached by Abby and asked to develop these resources. This is very much what we do. We go into schools and colleges in a variety of ways, some of it direct delivery, some of it through drama, but also we do provide lots and lots of resources for schools and colleges and anyone else actually working with young people to deliver to them themselves. And we also work with adults in the lives of young people as well, because having everybody on the same page, it just enables much more informed conversations to take place that are based on facts and not fiction, which normally will lead to young people making safer choices. So that's a little bit about me and the organisation. These sessions that we have put together, we have planned them as 20-minute sessions because we kind of envisaged, and in talking to the team at the local authority, the kind of biggest use of this they envisage being through schools. And we know that often in the morning there is that kind of 20-minute form tutor time registration where notices are given out, that kind of thing. And for many settings it is the only point at which PSHE is done. we have tried to make these resources as useful, as easy to use as possible, and they all contain certain elements. They are differentiated by age and stage. So there is one for year 7 and 8, there is one for years 8, 9 and 8, 9, 10 and 11, and then one for 12 and 13. And we've drawn on our experience of working with just thousands and thousands of young people to kind of think about what is most appropriate for that age, where does the messaging need to be, what is going to kind of impact on them the most. Every session does include ground rules because our experience, and we know from the teachers who deliver our materials, is that just setting that groundwork at the beginning really helps, making sure that the session feels safe, non-judgmental, people are able to put their opinions forward without fear of kind of stigma or shaming, but also know that they don't have to kind of say anything if they don't want to. That is all okay, because just people engage with it in different ways. So as I go through, and I'm going to go through each lesson in turn, apologies if you're more interested in 12 and 13, because that one will be at the end, but I promise that we are going to go through all of them. But they all have that commonality of those ground rules. They all contain video clips of locals with lived experiences of alcohol. They are very much designed as using then those videos as a jumping off point for a discussion. Young people learn just brilliantly from each other, and just enabling, facilitating those conversations between them. It's really helpful for them. Our experience also is that if you say do this or don't do that, they are not as receptive to it. But if you frame it as what would you say to a friend, or how would you support someone else, that tends to land more effectively, and they then will also translate it into things that they take on themselves as well. That one stage removed, and we all do that, don't we? I'm just asking for a friend, that kind of thing. There is always signposting to local services, which is just so important. If you don't know about what is around, then all of the resources will be kind of made available to you. And the aim really is just to increase knowledge, which in turn enables safer choices when in situations involving alcohol. There is a planning document that explains each session. It gives more context, it explains why that content is there, and all of this is also in the PowerPoint notes that accompany the slides. People like things in different ways. Some people like to print something off so they have it to refer to. Some people will have something on a whiteboard, but they will also have a laptop and they will be able to see the notes on that. That's why we do it both ways, to just make it as easy as possible for you. It's also just worth mentioning safeguarding, because there could be some students, some staff, anybody involved in this who find aspects of this content difficult and distressing because of what they've experienced, either directly or secondhand, and you all may also get disclosures as well. And it's just really important that whatever setting you're in, you know what your safeguarding policy is, what your processes are, so you know what to do if those kind of things happen. So I'm just going to go straight into the first session, which is the one for year 7 and 8. And the objectives for this, and these aren't actually shown in the slide deck, but they are on the plan. They're about really asserting social norms for young people around the number of people their age who are drinking alcohol. It will undoubtedly be less than they think, but knowing that is incredibly powerful in them making their choices. It takes away from the everybody's doing it vibe, and in turn that can really help with their decision making. It also gets them to think about what the risks are posed by drinking at a young age, because of the changes that their brains and bodies are going through when they are younger teenagers, or even earlier than that, but also thinking a little bit about how they reach their choices, because their peers are at this stage becoming much more important to them, and they're spending a lot more time with them. So just understanding what that can look like, how that can play out, and how to manage that and enable others to do the same is really important. And all of that signposting stuff as well that goes through all of them. So every session starts with this kind of holding slide, so you will know that you've got the right one according to whichever year group you're working with. I do have to say, if you feel like you have a particularly mature group, you may want to feel that you're going up a level, and equally if you feel that they're quite young and sheltered, you may want to go down. So do look at them and work out what feels right. You know the people that you're working with, so you are best placed to make that decision. So as I say, we have these ground rules, nothing kind of groundbreaking here, but it just is kind of just setting the scene really. And also that important thing around, if anything comes up that is difficult, please make sure that you do seek some help around that, and doing that kind of within that space, so they know that there are people there with a duty of care who are looking out for them. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to show all of the video clips that we've used because it would just take up too much time, but I do just want to show you one of them. I'm really hoping that the sound and everything works on this. So it just gives you a little bit of a flavour about what these are like, and then kind of how you use that as a jumping off point. I can hear someone's microphone isn't muted. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. So I would advise you really to have your cameras off and your microphones off, just so there isn't interference, but also so it doesn't leak through to anybody who then does watch this afterwards. So I'm just going to play this first video. Hopefully, if the sound doesn't work, can someone pipe up, maybe Abby or Georgia?
How old were you when you first drank alcohol? What made you try it?
I was around about 12 and I was in children's homes, brought up in children's homes and foster care, so it was peers, just a sociable kind of way of getting a drink.
Same for me. I think I was about 12 years old when I first had a drink. I just moved to schools and I had a bottle of cider. We used to go out onto the school field and go and drink cider.
Okay, so hopefully you get a little picture there of what the videos are like, and they just feel really real, really relatable. And just to say about those videos, they are all embedded within the slide deck, so you can just hover near the bottom and you can press play. If for whatever reason that doesn't work, there is also a link. You saw it at the top, it's also in the plan, and that will enable you to kind of locate it on our server, which means that you could then play it from there. So belt and braces around that. So what I thought might be quite nice to hear is to ask you a question, and if you could put your thoughts into the chat, which then maybe Abby, you could read out to me, because I can't see the chat at the moment because I'm sharing my screen. But what proportion of 11 to 13-year-olds do you think say that they have ever drunk alcohol? Do you think it's A, around 75%, B, around half, or C, around a quarter? So you can either give a number, or you could say A, B, or C. And if you could put your kind of thoughts into the chat. Abby, don't say who said what. Let's kind of keep it nice and kind of confidential. Nobody wants to feel exposed. But it would just be nice to kind of gauge what you think is kind of going on for young people. Abby, are you there?
Yes, sorry, Asha. So we've had quite a few A's, couple of B's, couple of C. It seems pretty mixed, to be honest with you, Asha. There's not like a one standout. C, B, C, maybe C actually.
Maybe edging up. You don't want this to be a question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, do you, where you've asked the audience where you don't know which one to go for. Okay, thank you very much. So I'm sure it sounds like you were kind of getting towards what the actual answer is, and we know this from data. It's actually C. Less than a quarter of 11 to 15-year-olds have ever had an alcoholic drink, and this is from the NHS Digital Survey, which surveys between about 12 and 15,000 11 to 15-year-olds every couple of years. They ask them a whole host of questions. It's all done anonymously. It's administered through schools. And the reason that context is important is because what we know from that is that people are unlikely to exaggerate or understate anything, because there kind of isn't any point. And kind of just knowing that it is less than they think, less than a quarter of 11 to 13-year-olds have ever even tried drinking alcohol. So that really important social norm, what that means is that over 3/4 haven't. And yeah, it's just really important to kind of embed that kind of theory. And as kind of people who are leading these sessions, the idea is very much that you ask the question to the group. You might want to do it as a show of hands, you might want to get some answers back, and just kind of gauge what their kind of beliefs are. So there are a couple of follow-up questions. What proportion of 11 to 13-year-olds say that they'd had an alcoholic drink in the last week? And it was actually around 3%. And in terms of those who say that they are regularly drinking alcohol once a week or more often, and again, pose this question to the young people in your care, it's actually less than 2%. And that's all from that NHS digital survey again. The reason we put this drink aware kind of sign on there is just because it's a really good resource in terms of finding out more facts and stats about alcohol. A caveat is that it is kind of put together by the alcohol industry, but in terms of risks and units and kind of lots and lots of useful information, it actually is pretty good. So if you did want to kind of signpost someone, if they wanted more information about alcohol, those longer term effects on younger people, that's a really good place to signpost them to. Now, this is the next question that you would be asking. What do you think is the safe number of units per week for under 15s? And my experience is that you get a really wide variety of answers to this. And the answer actually is 0. And it's about kind of showing this information, saying where it comes from, that this is about really clear evidence. The UK Chief Medical Officers did a huge trawl of all the scientific research a few years ago and came to the kind of completely clear conclusion that children under the age of 15 should not drink alcohol at all. That is about a full drink, by the way, not a sip to see what it tastes like. And it's because there is really clear evidence that alcohol can actually cause quite a lot of damage just because their bodies and brains are going through a lot of changes. And it definitely is worth them waiting, because people who start drinking when they are younger, they tend to have a much more problematic relationship with alcohol than those who wait. And actually they can endure not just through kind of adolescence, their teenage years, but actually into adulthood as well. So after you've kind of done this little bit, which hopefully should be nice and interactive and kind of quite lively, and our experience with year 7 and 8 is that they are really keen to kind of engage and kind of get involved. There is another video, which I'm not going to show here, but it has, again, the two people that you see there, they're talking about kind of what you think could be going on, what kind of the reasons can be for people drinking alcohol. And then this is a bit of a kind of springboard into another activity, which is a scenario. And it's about someone who's just moved house, started a new school, they're hanging out after school, and you know, it all seems just quite normal, quite innocent, quite age appropriate, and then actually someone produces some vodka and starts handing it round. And the individual kind of at the centre of this scenario, that thing about one step removed, what would you help, how would you help a friend? They want to fit in because they've just started a new school, but they haven't drunk alcohol before and they're a bit anxious about it and also worried about what's going to happen when they get home. And so it's kind of just about them working through what should this individual do. And we have deliberately kept it gender neutral. But also, if you were kind of within that group of friends, how could you help that individual? So just giving them a few minutes to work in small groups, or maybe a whole group chat about what they would do in that situation. And chances are they're going to kind of really hit upon peer pressure as being a significant influence. And that is also mentioned in that video that they will have seen beforehand. And hopefully they will have kind of come up with some advice that they would give each other. And so just following it up, some of the things that are on this slide, they probably will have mentioned, but some of the things it doesn't really hurt to introduce to them or to just kind of re-emphasize. The first thing is going back to that thing that they did right at the beginning. Most young people are not drinking alcohol. And knowing that is really powerful. But also, if just thinking ahead, what would they do if they were put on the spot and asked to make a decision? If they have practiced what they would say in that situation, chances are they're much more likely to be able to replicate it. So that kind of role play, it can be really helpful. And you can suggest all kinds of things. You know, my parents would kill me, it's against my religion, I've got a sports match tomorrow, I just don't want to. You know, there's all kinds of things that they can say, but if they've practiced, they're much more likely to be able to say it. Encourage them to kind of just give themselves time to think things through. What a lot of students will say is, oh, they could just kind of, Sam could just excuse themselves and just go to the toilet or something and just kind of work out actually what do they want to do, what feels right for them. And that's a great one. But just taking their time, thinking about what feels right for them, and also just remembering that even if you do make a different choice to your friends, that doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. And a good analogy that I often draw here is that within a friendship group, they will like different sports or support different sporting teams, or they will like different music, and that doesn't impact their friendship. In fact, that point of difference is interesting and it's nice, but they respect each other's choices, and that should extend to, you know, situations involving alcohol and drugs as well. That kind of think about what would you do if you were on your own, but also just saying to them that if they're feeling uncomfortable, chances are other people are as well. And if they're the person who says, do you know what, I don't think I want to do this, other people will then realise that there is an option to say no. And that is a really powerful, positive way of using peer influence. It's not pressuring, but it's just really, you know, kind of demonstrating that there is an alternative to just feeling pressured and going along with it. Just really kind of wrapping up this kind of year 7 to 8 session now, just emphasising that there's always a choice to be made, and the choice should always be theirs. They shouldn't be kind of swayed by what other people are saying or doing. Their life is their life, and they have to work out what is right for them. And then there's, of course, there is all of these kind of resources that they can look to. So there's all that local kind of provision. You're so lucky up there that you just have such amazing local services and local resources like Drug Hub UK. But also just thinking about where they could go if they are struggling. Young Minds is a really great organisation. They might be wondering about us as a charity. We have lots and lots of resources on our website, so just signposting to them, and also knowing about organisations like Frank, which can provide lots of information about alcohol as well as other drugs as well. And that final thing is about just reminding them that if they are struggling, if they're not sure about something, who would they talk to? Who is their trusted adult at home, at school? You know, maybe there's somewhere else, a sports club or a uniformed organisation that they go to. Who would they feel safe talking to? And just thinking about that just means, again, if they've kind of practiced that, they're much more likely to turn to them in time. Okay, so that's the year 7 and 8 lesson kind of done. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to years 9, 10 and 11? Now is your chance to put it into the chat. Hopefully Abby will let me know. Okay, I think I shall move on. So going on to the year 9, 10 and 11, and this kind of steps it up. And we know from all of the evidence that exists, but also from our extensive work in schools, that this is the stage at which they are getting into those social situations, you know, the majority of them, where alcohol is around. And so this does kind of go about it in a slightly different way. All that stuff around ground rules, you know, just making sure that they're feeling safe, they know that they can talk to somebody if anything comes up. But actually here we are starting with a kind of little group discussion, and it's quite an easy one. But how do people behave if they've had too much alcohol to drink? And you can run this as just a kind of group discussion. You might want to do it as partner work, but equally you could just say, how do people behave if they've had too much alcohol to drink? They will come up with lots and lots of answers, even at this age. It's not something that feels kind of too confrontational or anything like that. You might want to collate the answers on a whiteboard or flip chart, or you might just kind of want to kind of hold on to them in your head. This then goes into another short video, which kind of has the two women that you see here just talking about how they were affected by it. And then that follows on with kind of just some of the stuff that they say, and also some of the stuff that the students are likely to have said as well, or the young people that you're working with. And there's lots of things there that they may have thought of. And you might want to go into a little bit of the theory about how alcohol does what it does, which is that when people drink alcohol, it goes to their liver to be processed. But if someone drinks more than their liver can handle, which basically is more than 1 unit an hour, any surplus goes into the bloodstream and goes up to the brain, and it impairs lots and lots of quite basic functions, things like how awake someone feels, judgment, risk taking, emotions, coordination and judgment, verbal kind of reasoning. There's lots and lots of things that can happen, and that's why you get the effects that you see when people have been drinking too much. And the follow on from this is kind of really tying into what the risks are for younger people. So again, from that NHS digital survey, we know that a significant number of people who had been drunk in the last month had felt ill or had been sick. And just thinking about kind of the vulnerability that that poses for them, you might want to touch on something like this young man in this photo, how someone has taken a photo, and that will have got out on socials potentially, and that, you know, could be difficult for them in later life, could be embarrassing as well, in the kind of short term, about, you know, how they are viewed and the fact that, you know, they made a bit of a fool of themselves. Talking about how people can get into an argument, they can be in a fight, and there will be innocent people on the other side of that. A lot of people who have been drunk will damage their clothes or lose their phone or money or that kind of thing, and having to explain that to your parents or caregivers can be quite tricky. Getting into trouble with the police, and you know, it's a small number, but it's still significant, those who have been taken to hospital because they've really got themselves into a mess. And just kind of focusing in on what those risks are for a younger audience, because they probably will say things like, oh, you can get liver damage, and absolutely they can, but actually what's really more common is this quite basic stuff like injuring themselves, losing something, social embarrassment, being unwell, getting into a fight, that kind of thing. And just again, that social norm, because we haven't touched on that yet with the 9s, 10s and 11s. Most 11 to 15-year-olds have not been drunk. They have not been drunk, because you can see from that stat at the top, it was only 7% of 11 to 15-year-olds in that survey who said that they had been drunk in the last month. Over 90% had not been drunk. Again, knowing that should inform their choices. Now, I'm going to give you a question. You are a much more informed audience than when I'm talking to students, I have to say. So I like to think that you will know this off the top of your head. But which one of these do you think contains more alcohol? Half a pint of beer or a single shot of vodka? Let me know what you think in the chat. Abby, if you could just keep an eye on that and let me know which way it's going, that would be great. So you can just say beer or vodka. No A's or B's or C's this time.
Yeah, we're getting lots of vodka, lots and lots and lots of vodka. Yeah, vodka, but depends on the type of beer.
Ah, yeah. Good point. Good point. Yeah. And the interesting thing about this is that it is a little bit of a trick question, because they actually contain, if it is your bog standard kind of 4% beer, and vodka tends to just be 40%, but they will contain the same amount of alcohol, which is 1 unit. This introduces the concept of units to them, which is really helpful for them to know, because for most young people, when they first are exposed to alcohol, it isn't in a bar or a pub where things are being measured for them. It's much more likely to be an informal setting like a party or a gathering. Maybe they're down the park, where things are kind of just being handed around or poured out, and they probably don't think about it too much, and also it can be really, really hard to keep track. So having a sense of what comprises 1 unit of alcohol in different products is really, really helpful for them. So you can see the graphic here, and you can also see how widely it differs. Your kind of half pint 4% beer would be 1 unit. Cider tends to be a little bit stronger, so it would be a slightly smaller volume. But once we're getting into things like wine, and it's much, much smaller again. And with things like whiskey and vodka, it's really, really a very small amount. And just knowing that means that people can then track how much alcohol they are taking on. But also it gives them a sense of those different strengths, because they don't necessarily have that kind of clear in their heads. They know that there are different products, but they don't necessarily understand this concept of strength. All of this information, of course, is on the bottle. They might not be looking at the bottle. So yeah, it's a useful thing to underpin with them. And then this is another really good question to ask them. How long does it take the body to process a unit of alcohol? And of course, the answer is it takes 1 unit per hour. And the first hour doesn't actually count because it takes a while for the liver enzymes to get up to the level that they need to be and the alcohol to get to where it needs to be in order for it to start being processed. So if someone can know how much they've been drinking in terms of units, they can also then work out roughly when they're going to be out of their system. And just emphasising that there's nothing that anybody can do to speed this up. You can slow it down if you've damaged your liver or you've got a disease or something like that, but there's nothing anybody can do to speed it up. There's another video that follows this, which is really short. It's actually 2 different people, and they're talking about how it is in terms of what they worry about for their kids, because the woman you can see in this, it was actually her daughter who had a huge alcohol problem, and she's talking to this man who had problems with alcohol himself, and they just talk about really how they just cared about the people in their lives, and they knew that those people cared for them, and it was just really all about just wanting people to be safe and to be okay. So following up from that is some very tangible things that they can do to stay safe, all using their phones because they all have phones. So the first one is about setting up their in case of emergency details. If something happened to them, they're like lying in the road or a party or whatever it is that they are, chances are someone is going to pull their phone out of their pocket to see if they can find anything on there about who they would call. And the way that they would be able to do that is if they have populated their in case of emergency details, because their phone will inevitably be locked. But if you then press the emergency button, you can phone emergency services. But if they've put this information in, you can also see the details for their emergency contacts, who ideally should be their parents or their caregivers. That's actually my phone there. I've got my partner on there and actually my parents. So they would be able to be contacted too. And those people would want to know if something had happened to that loved one in their life. Talk to them about setting up an escape plan. With this, you agree a code. In this example, it's a single X, but it could be a particular emoji, but it's only ever used on its own within this context. The idea is that if someone is in a social situation in which they don't feel comfortable, they send this code to the person who's on the receiving end, ideally their parent or their caregiver, but it could be an older sibling or, you know, an aunt or uncle that they feel particularly close to. And the person on the receiving end knows what it means, that they don't feel great, and they just phone them or they send them a message back. And by doing that, it means that they can just say, oh, I've had a call that I need to leave. I've got to go home. Something's kicked off, or my mum's locked herself out of the house. And it just means that they can get out of a situation they don't feel great about without losing face in front of their friends. Now, the adult on the receiving end has to promise to not ask any questions, which can be quite difficult. But it's about building up trust. So if you're doing any work with adults as well, do talk about this and just say, you know, you want them to use it. It's a safety net. Safety nets do need to be unconditional. You have to just trust that it's there. But if you do put it in place and it is used and you have kind of honoured that not asking any questions, you do really build up that trust between them. They know that you're on their side. And my experience as a parent is that actually when you build up that trust, they probably will talk to you about it, not straight away, but maybe in a little while. So it's just a good thing to have there. Emphasizing the importance of having an app like What 3 Words on their phone, because it really maps the location really precisely. They can use it for emergency services or to tell someone where they are. And also to never be scared to call emergency services. Lots of young people have a real anxiety about calling emergency services. They think they're going to be in trouble, but they're not. And actually, if something went wrong and they were in a position to get help for them and they hadn't, that would be a really, really tough cross to bear. So just really underlining it is always okay to call emergency services. If you feel that need, if it doesn't feel right, if you're worried about someone, do that. Again, we've got all of that kind of signposting information on there that I talked about before, so I won't go through again. The local services, the national services, and a couple of organisations. And again, that making sure that they've thought about who they would talk to if they were worried for themselves, if they were worried for someone else, which adult. It can be really useful to say, you know, every member of staff within this setting has a duty of care for you. So it doesn't have to be, you know, your form tutor or the leader or the DSL. It can be anybody you feel comfortable with, because everybody has a safeguarding responsibility and everybody should know what those processes are. Right, any questions on 9, 10 and 11 before I move on to 12 and 13? Okay, let's keep going then. So here we are. This is the one for the oldest students. And then again, this takes it into a different level. They are very much in social situations where alcohol is around, even if they're not engaging with it themselves. You know, they're at sixth form or college. All of this stuff is going on. And they've probably also seen some bad stuff happen at some stage. So they can be really quite receptive. Not necessarily, they don't necessarily seem very interactive, but they tend to be really highly engaged with the content again at this stage, certainly in my experience of running workshops. So again, we've got the ground rules because they're universal for everybody, just highlighting the fact that they can talk to anybody if anything comes up that, you know, makes them feel uncomfortable or, you know, bring something to the surface that they think that they need to address. So here's the question that you would pose to them. How and when do you think it is acceptable to drink alcohol? And they might need a few little prompts around this. They can be a little bit quiet. So just saying, you know, you might want to think about things like quantity or who's around, context and frequency. And they will probably then start to say things quite quiet, carefully, like, well, it's probably not a good idea to drink if you're on your own. It's probably okay if it's like you're at a party, but probably not first thing in the morning. One or two is okay, but it's when people get into a mess because they've had way too much to drink. And if they're drinking all the time, that feels like it's probably a bit out of control. They're the kind of things that they will say in all of the ways that teenagers do. There is a video that follows this up, and it just really shows the two women talking about how it felt quite quick going from what seemed like normal drinking into something that was more regular and therefore more problematic, and how people were saying to them that we don't think this is right, but they felt that they were in control, but in hindsight they really, really won't. So my thing has, oops. So I've gone a little bit too far forward, sorry. Right, so where we go into here then is just kind of really talking about how there are different kind of behaviours around drinking. And always worth emphasising, not everybody is drinking. Not everybody is drinking alcohol. Among young adults, 18 to 25-year-olds, 39% are consciously sober. 39%. And that data was gathered by the Portman Group, which is actually like an alcohol industry group, who are quite invested in people drinking. So the fact that their data shows that, you know, is really quite powerful. So that is people choosing to not drink for a variety of reasons. Conscious sobriety is a growing movement in the particularly in young adults, actually. And again, it takes away from that everybody's drinking, everybody's getting drunk myth, because they're just not. But also kind of worth kind of just going through the different phases. It's occasional. It feels kind of not quite experimental, but, you know, it's just one or two. It usually doesn't involve too much. It will often be a social thing. You know, you go to the pub or you go to a party, or there's some kind of celebration, maybe, that kind of thing. And, you know, that's where it sits. There is, of course, binge drinking. It's actually a lot less than people think in terms of the number of units within a single session. The recommended maximum for adults in the UK is 14 units per week. It's the same for men and women, and obviously all of those 14 should not be in a single session. They should be spread out throughout the week with some alcohol-free days in between. And the data around that is based on health harms as opposed to kind of behaviour and things like that. But that is the absolute maximum recommendation, and people should not exceed that. But when it comes to binging, it's actually different for men and women. More than 6 units of alcohol in a single session for women, or 8 for men, would be considered a binge. And the reason that this is considered particularly harmful is there is a much higher rate of accident and injuries, but also other things can start to kind of get eroded, mood, memory, those kind of blackouts and things like that. And it actually increases the risk of longer term health problems that may not manifest for quite a long time, things like cancer and heart disease. And of course, someone who is binge drinking, they're much more likely to be sick, have hangovers, that kind of thing as well. Now, when we get into harmful drinking, that is regularly drinking more than 14 units per week. It may include binging, it may not, but that is really considered quite dangerous. There is an increased risk of quite serious health conditions, cardiovascular problems like stroke and heart attack. The liver can really get quite taxed, and actually quite detrimental effects on mental health as well. The mechanism by which that happens is quite complicated, but there's a lot of stuff that goes on with that. Now, it's another question to kind of think about is our experience is that older students are really, really interested and quite worried about addiction and dependence. And so a little activity here that you would be getting them to do is what do you think it looks like? Because they may well have quite stereotypical ideas of what addiction looks like. And this really aims to kind of break that down and show that it can really manifest in ways that are much more subtle. So and just enabling them to have a bit of a conversation about it, and you will find that they will bounce things off each other and someone will correct someone else and kind of build on something else, and that's quite a nice vibe when you get that going. But there's lots and lots of things there, some things which are kind of more obvious, I think, things like drinking more regularly or drinking larger amounts and not being able to moderate how much alcohol, and really risky things like drink driving, but actually being secretive about it, dismissing other people's concerns. And then some of those physical things as well, things like mental health problems, disturbed sleep. And actually a really significant thing is how dominant it becomes in their life. Other things are falling by the wayside. It has become too prominent in their life and is taking up too much of their headspace, which means that they don't necessarily have headspace for other things. So this then goes into another kind of little video clip where they talk about the impact of addiction and what that looked like and how that kind of really showed itself for them and how it impacted their lives. And that was really, really quite difficult for them.
It was kind.
So some other questions to ask, because addiction is really, really complicated. The brain basically gets rewired, and it is usually reversible if someone stops. But because of the rewiring, the individual who has the problem is not in the best position to realise that they have a problem. It's not their fault, it's their brain. And so there are some questions to ask about that are quite subtle that would indicate that they have more of a problem than perhaps they realise. And you don't need to kind of labour these, but just kind of highlighting them. How often are they drinking? If they are faced with the prospect of going without, at this age, they might be thinking about university open days. Maybe they're travelling, spending a night away with their parents, when they wouldn't be able to drink. And actually the thought of that makes them feel a bit twitchy. And if they do go without, things like irritability, restlessness, problem sleeping, they are withdrawal symptoms, and they will probably be accompanied by cravings. And if they do drink again, it will make those cravings go away, but it just kind of builds up their tolerance. It means that they need more to get the same effects, and again that chance of dependence developing is higher. But also, again, how important has it become to them? So a little question for you: why do you think, particularly young people, what do you think is the motivation behind why they drink alcohol? We've touched on a few things already, but what do you think might be a reason? This one's much more broad, so put your thoughts into the chat, and maybe Abby, you can just read those out to me and let me know what people are saying. What are they thinking?
Okay, Asha, so we've got sensation, the image, peer pressure, takeaway inhibitions, anxiety, to fit in with peers again, to block out thoughts, coping mechanisms, friends drinking, the enjoyment of it because they think it's cool, to relieve stress, to fit in with peers, risky behaviour, to emulate older peers, so to come across older as what the way they are, friends, happiness, coping, because it's fun, and they don't see it as a drug.
Yeah, and there's loads of things there, and they will come up with lots and lots of reasons. It might be a little slow to start with, but there will be lots of things. To me, I always think that they fall kind of quite broadly into kind of maybe three groups. You've got the effects, but then there's also kind of, you know, that curiosity, just wanting to see what it's like, or wanting to kind of feel your inhibitions go down maybe a little bit. There is that social context that is quite kind of significant for young people, wanting to fit in, social expectations. You go to a party, if you go to a party you drink, but also then there is that stuff around kind of mental health and struggling, coping strategy, boredom, addiction. So for me, they kind of fall into three different categories, but all of those things that you said, completely right. And I think the thing with this is that it's just really underlining how it's really complicated. And I think people tend to not think that, but it is actually really complicated, and it's not just linear one thing. Understanding that motivations are complicated is a useful thing for them to know. And there we've got that stat that I mentioned earlier, 39% of 18 to 24-year-olds don't drink alcohol at all. You will notice that there is that social norm throughout, running through all of these materials. So again, we've got a little video clip here where, again, this young lady, she talks about how it kind of spiraled from one thing into another and kind of really got out of control quite quickly. Again, we've got some really tangible things that they can do to stay safe, which I won't go through again, but it's the stuff around their phones in case of emergency details, having an escape plan. And for older students, even talk to them about setting it up within a friendship group. If you're at a party, one person says, we're going to the cinema on Sunday. Everybody knows what that means, and they just get out. They can talk about it afterwards. But, you know, that kind of safety phrase, it's a bit like when you go on a blind date and someone phones you and you have a way out. What 3 words, and that calling from emergency services again. All of that signposting is right there again. This one has the addition of the well communities, because that kind of kicks in for those older teenagers, because they are adults after all, and just really emphasizing all of that stuff around talking to a trusted adult at home, school, or anywhere else. If anybody's got any questions, please put them into the chat. Abby, you can just cut in, but I thought there was a couple of additional things that you might be interested in. One of them is handling tricky questions, because when you do this kind of content, there can be a concern. Are they going to say to you, have you ever been drunk? Do you drink? And what do you do about those questions? Because it can feel quite difficult. You don't know what to say. And some of it depends on your relationship with the students, of course, or the young people. But the thing really to do is just think about it a little bit beforehand and be conscious of the message that you give the rest of the class when responding to a question. So you don't want to be rude. You also probably don't want to reveal anything personal. Or too personal, but you also kind of don't want to get onto a difficult footing. So this is particularly in schools, where if you say something slightly unguarded, that can actually be quite detrimental when you're teaching those students, you know, for physics later on, you know, because that's going to be the thing that they're thinking about, that they associate with them. Thank them for asking the question. Just check that you've understood what they're asking, because you may be interpreting it in a very different way to what they mean, and also what they think the answer is. Kind of reflecting back to them can be really useful. It gives you a sense of their expectations, but it also buys you a bit of time. If you can, just give a factual, age-appropriate answer. It can be really useful to kind of just give a little bit of distance. So things like, oh, you know, well, yeah, I did drink when I was a bit older than you, but you know, when I was younger, there were these things called Alco Pops around, and they were really like 4%. And it does feel like now people are drinking things that are stronger, and so that means that it's going to potentially be a lot more dangerous for them and a lot more harmful. So you're kind of answering, but you're also giving some information as well. So that can be a useful thing to do. It is okay to buy time. It's also okay to say, I'll come back to you later outside this not with everybody else here. That is all okay. Do be respectful about that and do make sure that you do. But also sometimes when you get those cheeky questions, it can flag up a potential safeguarding issue. So something that I pick up on is that one of the questions when I'm doing a broader drug workshop is that I will ask what drugs they've heard of. And if someone says alcohol hand gel, that can be a little bit of a red flag to me, because that can mean that they are, particularly if they're 11 or 12, that can mean that they're in a house where that kind of thing maybe is talked about, or that is a bit of a thing. Someone has flagged that up as potentially being something that could be misused, which a lot of other people wouldn't regard as well. So just be aware, if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right, and just kind of be aware that it could be a safeguarding concern. It's always better to say it and mention it to somebody and talk through according to your safeguarding policies than not say and then something happens later on. And in terms of kind of the broader kind of framework within which this fits, in schools it's very much part of PSHE, and it isn't just about giving information and also kind of enabling them to practice things, though that is really useful. It's about kind of that wider piece around mental health, well-being, them feeling that there is a world bigger than themselves, and building up those problem solving skills and resilience, and also self-esteem, not telling them that they're brilliant at everything, but helping them to feel good about themselves in terms of their skills in navigating what can be tricky situations, because then they are much more likely to be able to do so in a safer way. Really important that there is a three-way relationship, if it is a school, between parents and families and students and the school, that one isn't kind of operating in isolation, and just always providing that pastoral support and signposting. You may get disclosures not about students if you're in a school, but actually about parents or other relatives or friends. And so, that obviously is a concern as well. So the final thing is, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to unshare my screen, because I know that I've thrown lots of information at you in a very short space of time. And I appreciate you all very patiently listening and responding to my little prompts as well, in engaging with that. Thank you very much. I can't see anything coming up in the chat, I don't think. Yeah, there's just all of the stuff from before. So thank you very much indeed for all of that. Did you want to do a little bit of wrapping up, Abby?
Absolutely, Asha. Thank you very much for that. It's really helpful, and I think to be able to give our colleagues something within Cumberland that they can use with young people is brilliant. What I would like to say is that obviously for Asha, we did talk a lot about it being in schools and doing it with groups and things like that, but there's no reason why you wouldn't be able to do and use the resources that Asha has showed us today in a one-to-one context, in a small group setting. It'd easily adapt itself to those as well. So obviously I know a lot of you guys that are on this call today aren't necessarily from schools, but you will be professionals that work with young people, and young people use alcohol, so you'll see it in your day-to-day work. So it can be used for anybody and everybody really in that situation. And if you can be that trusted adult for somebody, that they feel comfortable to talk to you and explore these conversations with you, and that's great, and hopefully you'll feel armed after today to be able to deliver that. Just a little side thing that I'd like to say aside from the training today. So obviously we are a Cumberland Council service, Youth Safe, and like I said at the start, we do support young people for one-to-one support. So that can be young people that are using any substance. So it doesn't have to be just alcohol, but it can be any form of drug and or alcohol. We can support young people that may just be curious, may just be dabbling in substances, right the way through to somebody having an addiction, a daily use of a substance. We can support that full breadth of that really. We are Cumberland based, so we'd only work with young people that are based within Cumberland. However, we do have strong links with our Westmoreland and Furness counterparts, so if you do have any young people that fall under that category, under that postcode, then we would be able to help you kind of link in with that service as well. Georgia, who's from my team, is going to post for us very, very nicely now a QR code for our Instagram page. So as Asha mentioned earlier, earlier, we do have an Instagram page that's called Drug Hub UK. We find that that works really well for the young people that we support, not only in Cumberland, but also nationally as well. We do get a lot of other young people that kind of,
It's
you know,
brilliant. It's such a good
touch
resource.
base.
We signpost to it all the time. We think it's absolutely brilliant. We love it.
Oh,
No,
hello.
that's great,
Sorry,
Asha,
bear with me a
thank you.
second. I'm just trying to turn the volume down on my computer. Sorry.
Oh no, you're all right, Dina. Don't worry.
Yeah, sorry, go on. No, it's okay. Did you say?
Just knocked Dina off there. So yeah, please do use that. If you have Instagram yourself, then please do follow the page. Please do encourage young people to follow that page. Young people can be reluctant to follow the page, and the reason why that young people do get reluctant is because they don't want to be stigmatized as following a drug you know, substance page, which is fair enough, but as long as it's on their radars and they can use it as a resource that they can dip into as and when they want, they don't have to follow the page in order to get the helpful information that's on there. So as long as young people are using it, that's the main priority for us. But for you guys as professionals, you know, obviously if you guys are happy to follow it, then you will always be able to refer young people to it as well. Florence, I've just seen your message in the chat in terms of how do you get the resources. So I obviously have all your email addresses now because you've all been emailing me to get the link for today's meeting. So I will make sure that that gets sent out to you, Florence, in an email as well. What I'll also do, everybody, in regards to sending out those resources, I'll also attach our referral form to the service as well. So if you are ever in need of somebody to support a young person that you're working with, or somebody that you would like us just to have a conversation with, if you need any advice and guidance about anybody that you're working with, or parents are concerned and they're coming to you around substances and alcohol, please do direct them my way. You have my email address. It has my works mobile number on my emails that I've been sending you all. I'll send you the referral form. Everybody within the team is open to take conversations and chats from anybody, and if we can support as many young people within Cumberland as possible with substance or alcohol use, then you know that's what we want to do as a service. So I'd just like to thank everybody for attending this afternoon. I appreciate this time of year is a very busy time of year. Hopefully you'll be able to take away something from today, so you'll be able to share it with young people prior to Christmas, prior to New Year, and then if there is anything more that we can help you with, then please do come back to us. We're here to kind of support in any way that we can.
Thank you very much as well for kind of commissioning us to do this piece of work for you. Lots of thank yous coming through. I did put some stuff into the chat as well. We have got a feedback survey. I'll send that through to Abby as well. So as you send things out, if you've come along to this, then just letting us know how it landed and all of that kind of stuff would be really helpful. And also, if you just want any more information about the stuff we do, we have loads of stuff that's free of charge, lots of free PSHE to download, staff training. We work with other people like Bath University, and so there's lots and lots of things there. And if you just want a bit of information about who we are as a charity, there's lots of information on there. So I'll send all of those links on to Abby as well. Thank you, but thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.